Most landlords, most investors don't go broke overnight. Instead, they slowly bleed profits away. And I see the same 7 mistakes being made time and time again. And these are the most dangerous ones. So if you own or plan to own or thinking about buying a property in the UK, ignore these mistakes at your peril. And the last mistake we mention in this video is probably the most crucial. Let's dive into it. Hello, my name is Marco. I'm a portfolio landlord, property investor, developer, and mentor. And I love talking about residential property. Now, a quick shout out, one of my mentees, Andy's had a cracking year so far. He's completed on the purchase of a 2-bed flat down south at a reasonable discount, which is generating an extremely strong return on capital. So well done, Andy. Right, number 1, let's get straight into it. And that is over leveraging. And let me explain here. So the amazing and beautiful thing about property is we can use leverage. We can use other money to help scale and build our portfolio, and I certainly wouldn't be here in this lovely home if I hadn't utilized leverage. However, there's a thing such as borrowing too much money, or otherwise known as over leveraging, and I just want to talk very briefly about this, perhaps how to avoid it. So when we're buying a buy-to-let property in the UK, and that's with a mortgage, we're using leverage, and typically most investors who are looking to scale quickly and aggressively will borrow as much as they can, and with a typical bog standard buy-to-let mortgage, that's a 75% loan, so that's 75% of your purchase price effectively. Now, this can be great when it comes to scaling and being quite aggressive, but when we've maybe ascertained a certain portfolio size or we've hit our goal, do we really want to maintain this high loan to value? I mean, there's no doubt about it, 75% is a high loan to value. It's the highest that's commonly offered amongst lenders. And my argument here is no, we don't, and it's too risky to have our debt at such higher level. So for example, I'll give you 2 examples. Firstly, the more apparent one, which can happen at no matter what time in the economic cycle. If your remortgage is up and you have originally financed your property at a 75% mortgage based on the value, and maybe only 2 years has elapsed since that mortgage, so maybe property prices haven't moved on, if anything, really, in those 2 years, in that very short time span. Well, what if the surveyor comes back and says, I'm sorry, that property is worth £10,000-20,000 less than what you paid for it? And assuming you want to maintain that same loan to value, that 75% loan to value, you're going to have to put cash in just to maintain this deal. So that's one reason why I think sometimes leveraging to the max is not the best idea. The second time is the more obvious explanation is when we're in a downturn. So if we're in a property downturn, property prices may fall. It's unlikely they're going to drastically fall, but let's put ourselves into the 2007, 2008 scenario where the fall in property prices was prominent. It was noticeable, and all of a sudden, if you're borrowed at 75%, the exact same scenario is going to play out, where the surveyor or the valuer is going to come back and downvalue your property. And if you want to maintain that 75% loan to value, you're going to have to put cash in to make that deal happen. So I suppose what you can take from this is that it's great when we're being aggressive, when we're taking risk, but there will be a time when we need to just dial it down a bit, maybe go down to 60% or even 50% loan to value. Me personally, I like to operate around that 50%. For me, it's an unreasonable amount of debt. In my opinion, it's low risk too. The second mistake that I see property investors and landlords doing all the time is overpaying for property. And I thought about putting this at number 1, but it's perhaps too much of an obvious mistake. You can always go up, you can rarely go down. So if you are in any doubt whatsoever as to what to offer for a property, always go on the lower side, or in fact, just whatever you're thinking, minus off 10%, probably about a good way to start negotiations. I certainly remember my very first property deal that I purchased, I bought it for just over asking price, £50 above asking price. And knowing what I know today, I'm pretty confident and pretty sure I would have been able to secure that at a much lower price point. So remember, you can always go up, you can rarely go down. Now, if you are getting value from this video, please do consider liking this video. It really will mean a lot to me because it pushes this video out to other like-minded people. It tells YouTube that this is a half-decent video for people to consider watching. Thank you very much. Number 3, this is a crucial area. This is a really crucial area which most I'd say most landlords and investors don't want to know about, because it's perhaps the more drier or duller or boring type stuff. But this really is where the fortune is made. And that's how to minimize your tax liabilities and how to structure also property acquisitions. I mean, the structuring side is probably the more obvious side. We've got videos on the channel about personal name, limited company, but really how to minimize tax is key and crucial. And me personally, it's been a game changer for me once I understood all the tricks and tools and everything that we have in our arsenal as property investors and landlords to minimize our tax liability. Now, I heavily rely upon my accountant when it comes to these types of things, but I've learned so much from Darren over the years that we've been working together. And I think this is a very nice part of the video to slot in a bit of a plug, dare I call it a sell, to Darren's services. Darren is a chartered accountant. In fact, he's a partner at Leon & Company, chartered accountant. They've been around yonks, incredible company, but small, flexible and nimble company with old school fashions, old school traditions. And that's really why I love being with them. Everything is personal. Darren's always on the other end of the phone if I've got any questions. And we always have a physical one-to-one meeting for our annual end of year accounts where I can really understand what's going on in my business. And every time in this particular meeting, Darren will come up with 3 or 4 ways how we can further reduce the tax liability of the several limited companies. So if you are looking to either start your property journey and you're not sure the route to go, personal name, limited company, please do reach out. The link's in the description. I'll put you in touch with Darren, an incredible chat with you and give you your options. But on the contrary, if you are an existing landlord and investor and perhaps you're thinking about switching an accountant, or maybe you're not too happy with your current accountant, which is most often the case, then please again contact me. The link is in the description and I'll put you directly in touch with Darren Stone, partner at Leon & Company. Number 4, this is a huge mistake, and I've seen this mistake happen fairly recently, and it's not referencing tenants correctly. Well, I say correctly, there's really no right or wrong way. Well, in fact, there are several wrong ways, but there's no particular one right way. However, this is the most important part of the process. If you are self-managing, like most of my clients do, and that's what I help teach in my coaching service, if you do self-manage, this is probably the most important part of the whole process, because we want tenants in our property who are going to respect the property, who are importantly going to pay on time and pay in full. We don't want tenants that don't pay rent. That's when the headaches start to incur. So, I see people skipping this step. Maybe they just go on a gut vibe, and of course we've got to take into account gut. We're 110%. I agree with that philosophy. I agree with that approach. But there's also some very black, hard things which are non-negotiable that we must get back in a positive manner when we're referencing our potential tenants to put in our property that we've paid our hard-earned money and cash for. So if this isn't your skill set, or if you don't really like delving into too much detail and doing this type of work, you can outsource this. Just be wary, be conscious. I often see this service outsourced at an inferior quality, especially if you are only paying £20. I'm not going to drop any names, but there are some major suppliers and they do a pretty terrible job. The reason I know is because I often get calls from them who my tenants leaving my properties and they're asking for references, and the questions that they ask are pretty poor. Now, again, if management or tenancy related things isn't something you want to involve yourself in, of course, instruct an agent to manage your properties, and the right agent is worth their weight in gold. They'll be able to do the tenancy referencing process for you and recommend a suitable tenant for you. Now, it's much easier to get this done right on the onset than to fix any issues as they crop up later down the line. So for me, if I'm in any doubt whether the tenant's a good tenant to put to place or not, it's a very simple answer. If I'm in doubt, sorry, I've changed my mind, or the referencing has come back in a negative manner, see you later, and we'll move on to the next in the nicest possible way. So this is an area where you don't want to be taking on risk in your property portfolio. So the 5th mistake I see being done time and time again, it's so common, landlords not passing on rent increases. And I'm talking about existing tenancies here, and fair, small but regular rent increases. So perhaps it's just a small sum every 12 months just to keep pace with inflation or to keep pace with the supply demand in that particular area. And I've seen portfolio landlords leave tens of thousands of pounds on the table just by almost forgetting about the rent. I'm not sure why, I'm not sure the motivation behind it. Perhaps they've forgotten, perhaps they're too worried or anxious to initiate that type of conversation, or perhaps their agents never even suggested it. So if you have several properties, I would strongly recommend you reviewing your rents across your portfolio at least every single year to have an idea of what the supply-demand rate is. Now, I'm not saying we need to increase it to that supply-demand rate, the current rate for our existing tenants. If they're good tenants as well, I always give my good tenants a small discount as a gesture of goodwill and to show I appreciate their custom. So it's got to be a win-win between us and a win-win with the tenant as well. Now, the past 2 points I've laboured to you, the first referencing tenants and the second, increasing our rents small but often. These points are mentioned in the book, The Essential Rules of Property Investing, which is available to purchase on Amazon. The link is in the description. And I must add, all profits generated from the sale of this book are donated to charity. The sixth mistake I see being made on a weekly basis, at least, are investors underestimating the refurb cost and underestimating how long that refurb is going to take. In fact, just this morning I was having a conversation with someone and he's 6 months down from where he should have been. So firstly, the refurbs always cost more than what we think, because in general we're quite optimistic people and we think things are going to cost less and we try and make things happen. Well, that's how I review and appraise most property investors. But it's always important to have a contingency. And if you're a brand new investor, new to refurbs, new to property, whatever you think it's going to be, add 20%. It's a nice, easy rule of thumb, and it will help you stay within your budget, because I can tell you right now, you're going to overspend. Now, the second idea behind this mistake is that not only do we overspend, but the refurb takes longer than what we think. And more often than not, this second is the more common. So again, whatever you think you're going to take, I would actually multiply that more or greater than 20%, perhaps add another 25% or 30% on that timeline, and you're probably going to be give or take about right. And now remember, a really important point that I've been speaking about with one of my mentees. He's currently undergoing 2 refurbs, and it's this: sometimes it's best to pay in to get extra help. It means bringing in the refurb in early, or bringing in the refurb, in fact, on time, because the opportunity costs of loss of rent can be significant in larger type properties. Take a 3-bed semi rented for 4 figures every single month. Well, if that's just left in terms of the refurb, into the refurb project timeline, perhaps if that's 2 or 3 months down the line and it's been delayed, well, that's 2 or 3 grand plus in rent we're missing out on. So sometimes it's worth paying a labourer to speed things up a bit. If it's just a bit of painting, a bit of decluttering, whatever that is, don't be afraid to pay a handyman or a labourer to come help you finish that refurb on time. And that is a lesson I learned the hard way on my very first property. Now, we come across properties requiring refurbs time and time again, and some of these I post on my email list. So if you're not already subscribed to the email list where you receive property deals and a monthly property market report, and I detail what's happening within the property market, not at a top level but behind the scenes, then please do sign up. It's completely free of charge, and the link is in the description below. Okay, we're on to the last one now, number 7, and this, as I've already mentioned, is the biggest mistake I see investors and landlords making time and time again. In fact, I can guarantee, I say 75% of investors don't even think about this, and that's when we're ignoring the opportunity cost. Thinking about opportunity cost is really important, because when we purchase a property, we typically have equity in the property, and a nice easy way to explain equity is the market value minus the mortgage, assuming you've got a mortgage on the property, and that's our equity, right? Now, our equity tends to build up over time, because as the property prices grow up over time, so does our equity, even if we're maintaining the same loan to value. But what investors don't ask themselves, or what most investors don't ask themselves, is what is the opportunity cost? Perhaps I could have amassed £100,000 cash, or even a greater sum, in a particular property equity-wise. But actually, if I can get a better return over here, there's a very strong argument, a very strong thesis to sell this investment and switch into the newer one. Now, of course, that newer one can't just be an extra percent. That's probably not worthwhile switching. But if it's an extra 3, 4, 5%, definitely worthy of our time thinking about switching to this better investment over here. And that's what we mean about opportunity cost. So how can we use our existing equity to better use? And it's a really good exercise to carry out, and I really encourage you, if you've never done this before, it's very simple to do. Put your properties down one side on an Excel spreadsheet, put down what you think a rough current market value is, put down any debt, what your mortgage is, and the difference is your equity in the property, and what could you do, what could you invest in to try and get better deal. And as we become better investors, of course, we come across and we generate better property deals, so naturally we'll be able to swap our properties slowly over time for better returning properties. So think about opportunity cost, explore the equity you have within your own properties to play with. And if you don't have any properties at the start of date, don't worry, you will have shortly. And this will be a consideration that hopefully you'll remember to think about. So to summarize, 7 mistakes, I'm just going to turn to my laptop to read them out to you. First of all, over leveraging. Second is overpaying. Third is not understanding how we can minimize our tax liability. The fourth is poor tenant referencing. The fifth is to not pass on any rent increases. Number 6 is to we often underestimate the refurb cost and how long that refurb is going to take. And number 7 is ignoring the opportunity cost. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and you would like to reach out or thinking about how we can work together, head to my website. You'll find there property coaching and other types of services. I would love to hear from you. And I want to let YouTube decide which video to serve and offer you up next. And I'd very much love to see you on that very next video. If you have a comment, a question, or something at all you want to say related to this video in particular, comment below. I respond to all very nice comments and questions personally on the channel. So with that being said, I sincerely wish you an incredible week and all the best in your property investing journey. Goodbye.